Mr. Attorney General, nice to talk to you, sir.
Good to see you, Greta. Thanks for having me on.
Congratulations on your new book.
Thank you very much.
You and I are both lawyers, so I want to talk about the January 6th hearing from a little bit different perspective. Not about the content, because I think it's important we get to the bottom of this, but the process. Lawyers are obsessed with process. Professor Alan Dershowitz is upset with the process. Do you have any problem with the way this is being conducted?
Well, my main problem is the idea that the purpose of it is to develop a criminal case in Congress. I think if people want to view this as a potential crime and criminal activity, the place to investigate that is the Department of Justice through grand juries.
And they are.
To some extent, it appears. Yeah. But obviously, that's a secret process. We don't know how much is going on. But I don't think the Congress is the proper vehicle to develop a criminal case. I think they should focus more on the storyline. And, you know, if they want to make the case this was reprehensible behavior, which I think it was January 6th, or that the president was derelict in not following up during the many hours this was going on, make that case. But the constant talking heads from Congress talking about whether this is a crime or that this is evidence of a crime, I think is a misuse of the process. And it sort of highlights the fact that it is a committee that's weighted in one direction. However, I think that talking point is a little bit stale also, which is, gee, you know, there's no cross-examination. That's true, you're only hearing sort of one side. But still, they've brought out some important facts that I think people have to take note of. My own view is that for Merrick Garland to pull the trigger on a criminal prosecution of a former president, it's a pretty high bar. I think he will apply. I think he will need very clear evidence of a clear crime, and I'm dubious that they've reached that stage.
The thing that I think of when I look at this hearing is that, look, I've presented cases in court, and you cherry pick what helps you, and so naturally this is being cherry picked. Would it not benefit the American people if they just opened up everything, transparency, gave us complete access to all the depositions, minus national security if there is some, but just so that we can see everything rather than just what they select?
Yeah, I think it would. But it doesn't surprise, Congress is a political body, and it doesn't surprise me that the hearings are being conducted in a way with a political objective. I mean, that's not a shock. I do think the Republicans should have either fish or cut bait. They either should have succeeded in pulling all the Republicans out or participate. And it's sort of half and half right now. So it's a confusing structure.
You mentioned that Attorney General Merrick Garland would have a high bar to charge a president. What do you mean by that? Is it a higher bar than a non-president who might be charged with behavior like this?
Well, I think in going after a former president, using the criminal law against a former president, by a high bar, I mean, I think he would not be, and this is my supposition, I don't think it's the time for being adventuresome or using esoteric legal theories or first-time legal theories. I think you need a clear-cut crime and you need clear evidence of intent, because this is a case that's really going to turn on subjective intent. And to prove subjective intent, corrupt intent beyond a reasonable doubt, he's going to require some strong evidence. You know, not reacting to what was going on the Hill, in my mind, was very shameful and should be told to the American people what happened, but it's not necessarily a crime.
I've been reading for years that the Department of Justice either has a policy or rule or something that it won't charge a politician running for election or re-election within a time frame before an election. Is that true? Is there a written policy, or is there something that binds the Department of Justice? Yeah,
it's a written policy. It's not as firm as it's frequently stated, and not as absolute as frequently stated. The basic policy is people generally say, you know, within a certain number of days, 60, 90 days, or what have you, you shouldn't indict someone who's running in a campaign. The actual policy is that, as I've explained, is that you can't do anything for political reasons. You can't do anything for the purpose of affecting an election, and you have to bear that in mind when you have a case. And therefore, unless there's a compelling reason to indict before an election, such as the expiration of a statute of limitation or concerns over spoliation of evidence or something, you generally would wait until after the election. That is generally the tradition within the department.
Your former boss, President Bush 41, when he was running for re-election in '92, if my recollection is correct, a few days before that election, Casper Weinberger, who was then the defense secretary, was re-indicted on something, and he was often reported that he thought that through the election.
Absolutely.
You think so too?
Absolutely. Going into that last weekend, the multiple polls showed the election was tied or within a point. Bush was picking up momentum. That Friday afternoon, the special counsel, the independent counsel, re-indicted Casper Weinberger and gratuitously put in some paragraphs about Bush's role, which wasn't claiming Bush had committed a crime, saying he had been present at a meeting. And it gave the impression that Bush had done something wrong, and the polls collapsed over the weekend. And that was, in my mind, one of the worst abuses of an independent counsel of all time. There was no reason for him to do that before the election.
Would that have fallen in sort of the window of this policy, although Casper Weinberger wasn't up for re-election, but that would have fallen within the policy?
Right. And if that had been within the department would have waited till after the election.